At the center of debate history, one singular figure stands at the center of both development, evolution, and creativity. That figure is Pi Kappa Delta and their national convention.
Join us on an everlasting journey of discovery as Simpson Colleges presents the oral history of the Pi Kappa Delta National Tournament, structure, and events. The journey of debate in the 20th century was a tapestry of innovation and resistance. It all began in the aftermath of World War I. Kansas, 1916. The first national convention comes to order. This isn't the tournament we know today, but a different debate on a setting course for a new organization is front and center.
The original tournaments had decent and growing attendance, but it isn't until the second convention that there is actual debates. Redland College actually won the first 2 years of convention, but those initial conventions weren't what we actually know as the debate tournament. They were simply to get the ball rolling on some organizational things. And as intellectuals sought for a platform for intellectual combat, debates were often long, drawn-out affairs, often culminating in a single resolution.
The early debates were influenced by two things. Harvard and Yale had large debates that would be one event, and also by traveling capabilities, where often only a few people could reach a new destination. This means having a massive competition was much harder.
But in 1926, the winds of change swept through the debate circuit. Tournament-style debate emerged. The tournament style of debates can be traced to many influences for its components. However, to put it all together in an organization fashion is distinctly Pi Kappa Delta's achievement. At the 6th convention, the way that we viewed debate began to be more competitive.
You see, events were originally split into men's and women's divisions for debating. This trend remained essentially until the 70s. However, the most interesting development was the double elimination structure, which allowed for the field to be gradually mitigated. It was a seismic shift that laid the groundwork for future competitions, also including extemporaneous speaking and the oratory events, which allowed a voice of competitors to be heard and set the movement for more individual events to come. That year also showed the competitor and relation focus of the national tournament. With winter sports included in off time during the convention, the organization was growing, but something was about to bring even more.
As commercial air travel soared in popularity in 1929, so, too, did the amount of chapters. Each year's conventions grew before this, but with greater mobilization brought concerns.
Both council members and chapters started to be concerned with more keeping the convention on schedule. Some people in 1934 even advised meeting in off years to possibly shift some duties of the prelim rounds to there.
Caps became one metric to try and make sure that there weren't endless debates that ate up the whole convention. However, a change was definitely needed. This is where we began to see a shift to preliminary rounds and some brackets, so that we had prelim wins determining who went to that bracket.
That it's hard to call somebody national champion because there's never any face-to-face competition in order to determine who really is better between your top 6 or 10 or however many people you want to advance. So that was one criticism. Another criticism was that it just wasn't the Pi Kappa way, right? That would be focusing too much on the competitive piece of the tournament. You know, we just needed to call it superior and excellent. The idea of giving so many different awards was always intended to reflect an egalitarian attitude toward competition. The idea that we recognize excellence, but we recognize that there is a depth of excellence.
During 1934, Congress was added as a new debate event that was held at the state capitol, which was a huge draw of people. Over 800 people were delegates there, but there was still a fear at this point. So much that in 1936, they tried a system where there were not even winners of debate, but rather superior for undefeated and winners of 7 rounds, and that would gradually go decreasing down to excellence and good to acknowledge more debaters. Eventually, they would settle on a structure that would be around 8 rounds, with sometimes the brackets starting at different points to be able to add more people into the debate.
Change was sweeping the style and things were looking solid, but one change was unpredictable. The debate landscape was forever altered by the specter of war. Events reflected the tumultuous times.
Congress in that one convention year that happened at the start of World War II, turnout was way down. So much that Congress only had to become a unicameral system as opposed to a bicameral. And in 1942, they did have the first stunt award for student events that were held, but there was a distinct difference, and PKD had no real option except to postpone the National Convention.
And thus, PKD went 5 years without a national convention. But from the ashes of conflict emerged new opportunities. Seeding was introduced in 1949 to balance competition, setting the stage for a golden age of debate. The 1960s and 70s saw a surge of innovation for events, starting in debate with mixed debate.
This was the first step in breaking the norms of gender debate formats, and was a huge step in progress. These years, just like the American discourse, was a revolutionary time for PKD events, with the inclusion of interp events for the first time during 1969. And although it was a giant mix of poetry, prose, and dramatic interp, it would morph into what we know today as all of our interp events.
So part of that meant be comprehensive. Part of that meant offer what other comprehensive national tournaments offered so that we could be a one-stop shop. So we largely looked at the tournament, at the offerings that each of those national tournaments offered. And between Phi Rho Pi and Delta Sigma Rho Tau Kappa Alpha, many of the experimental events that we initially offered were also offered at those tournaments.
Standards were set, and new events like extemporaneous debate, early LD, which had 3 categories of fact, value, and policy, and CEDA, or Cross-Examination Debate Association, reshaped the competitive landscape. Additionally, individual events like Informative in 1973, Speaking for Entertaining 1975, and 1981 were both impromptu and duo.
It still wasn't a perfect system. Problems did exist, though, with things like distinctions of debate as championship, which had only accessible if you had 60% wins over the year and competed in 10 debates, which added some elitism to the activity. However, gradually this was changed in 1985 and 1987, changing championship to senior, then varsity, and standard to junior and novices.
And those changes only continued to move forward. In the digital age, debate continued to adapt and thrive. Online tabulation streamlined the process, while new chapters embraced a changing landscape of events and formats. However, the shift wasn't the cleanest, to be honest, as tech always does.
The format has changed, especially including an off-year tournament to be able to do more debates. Today, debate and interpretation events stand as a pillar of academic excellence, inspiring countless students to be able to sharpen their minds and hone their craft through persuasion, the great equalizer. The journey continues as new generations embrace the challenge of civil discourse and the power of persuasive storytelling. From humble beginnings to grand stages, the story of the development of the Pi Kappa Delta National Tournament is a story of how development and perseverance can bring ideas to the forefront.
Join us next time as we delve deeper into the untold stories of the Pi Kappa Delta National Tournament with your co-host, Ryan Corcoran, and me, Andrew Samountry. And this has been An Oral History.